Revenge is a dish best served cold, but for Mark Jacobs it was about to be served on the polished white marble floor of a luxury car dealership. When he divorced his wife Amelia, he called her dreams of running a small online business cute and unambitious. 5 years later, he decided it was time to show her what real success looked like. He bought a brand new screaming yellow Lamborghini, a monument to his ego, and orchestrated a chance encounter to rub it in her face. He expected her to be jealous, maybe even regretful. What he didn't expect was that the woman he'd belittled didn't just have a successful business. She held the keys to his new prized possession and the entire building it came from. This is the story of how a show of arrogance led to the most crushing humiliation imaginable. Mark Jacobs believed in symbols. To him, success wasn't a feeling or a state of mind. It was something you could see, touch, and most importantly, show off. It was the glint of a Swiss watch on his wrist, the sharp cut of a Tom Ford suit, and the hushed admiration in a restaurant when he dropped his platinum card. For the past 5 years, ever since the divorce, he had been meticulously constructing an empire of these symbols, each one a brick in the wall he built around his own insecurity. The divorce from Amelia Sterling had been in his mind a necessary amputation. She was the opposite of a symbol. She was quiet, substantive, and found joy in things he couldn't quantify. A well-read book, a walk through a park, or the slow, steady growth of her little online boutique that sold handcrafted leather goods. During their final acrimonious arguments, he had sneered at her ambition. An online shop, Amelia, it's cute. A nice little hobby to keep you busy while a real man builds an empire. He had built that empire, or at least a convincing facsimile of it. His consulting firm, Jacobs & Associates, had landed a few major contracts, catapulting him into a new tax bracket. He'd moved into a glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city, and for the past year had been dating Tiffany Monroe, a 25-year-old influencer whose entire existence was a curated collection of symbols. She was in every way the anti-Amelia. But one symbol was missing, the ultimate symbol. The one that screamed, "I have arrived," so loudly it deafened all whispers of doubt. A supercar. That's what brought him to Prestige Automotive Group, the city's most exclusive dealership. The showroom was less a car lot and more a modern art gallery. Gleaming machines sat under strategically placed spotlights on a floor of impossibly white polished marble. The air smelled of expensive leather and a faint, clean scent of metal. This was a temple of wealth, and Mark was here to worship. His target was a Lamborghini Huracan Evo Spider in Giallo Inti, a yellow so bright it was almost violent. It was vulgar, audacious, and completely impractical. It was perfect. Tiffany clung to his arm, her eyes wide. "Oh my God, Mark, it's even better in person. The color people will literally stop and stare everywhere we go." "That's the point, darling," Mark said, a smug grin spreading across his face. A salesman named James approached them, his smile practiced and deferential. "An excellent choice, sir. The V10 engine is a masterpiece of engineering. 640 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds. Mark waved a dismissive hand. "I've read the specs. Let's talk numbers." He enjoyed the dance of negotiation not because he needed a discount, but because it reinforced his position of power. He made James work for the commission, questioning every fee, every add-on before finally agreeing to the full sticker price with a sigh, as if he were doing them a favor. As he signed the paperwork in a glass-enclosed office, his mind wasn't on the six-figure wire transfer. It was on Amelia. He pictured her in her modest, suburban home, the one she'd insisted on keeping after the divorce. He imagined her packing one of her leather bags to ship to a customer, her hands probably smudged with dye. He pictured the look on her face when he pulled up in this roaring yellow beast. It wouldn't just be a car, it would be a verdict. A final, undeniable judgment on who had won their separation. "So when can I take delivery?" Mark asked, tapping his pen impatiently. "We just need to complete the final prep and detailing, Mr. Jacobs," James replied. "It will be ready for you tomorrow afternoon. We can have it delivered to your residence, of course." Mark scoffed. "No, I'll pick it up myself. I want to drive it right out of the showroom." He wanted the full experience, the curtain pull, the applause. He wanted the moment. That night he could barely sleep. He scrolled through pictures of the car, rehearsing the conversation he'd have with Amelia. He wouldn't call her. No, that was too direct, too needy. It had to be a chance encounter. He knew she still frequented a small cafe, the Daily Grind, every Saturday morning. It was a habit from their marriage he'd always found tedious. Now it was the perfect stage for his triumph. He would park the Lamborghini right out front, the yellow so loud it would be impossible to ignore. He'd walk in feigned surprise and then, with Tiffany on his arm, deliver the killing blow with casual condescension. "Mark, are you listening?" Tiffany's voice broke through his reverie. She was sitting up in bed looking at him with a pout. "I asked what our first post should be. A boomerang of the doors going up or a cinematic reel with a Drake song?" Mark smiled. She was beautifully simple. "Both, darling," he said, pulling her close. "We'll do both." He was no longer just Mark Jacobs' successful consultant. Tomorrow he would be reborn as Mark Jacobs, the man who had everything. And he would make sure the one person who he felt had ever doubted him would be there to witness it. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect day for a public execution of an old life. Mark spent 2 hours getting ready. He chose a pair of designer jeans, a crisp white shirt, left artfully unbuttoned at the top, and a pair of sunglasses that cost more than Amelia's entire monthly mortgage. Tiffany, a vision in a white sundress, looked like she had been born to be passenger seat decoration. Picking up the car from Prestige Automotive Group was everything he had dreamed of. The staff gathered as his Huracan was driven onto a central turntable under the showroom's main chandelier. They applauded. James handed him a carbon fiber key box with the reverence of a religious offering. The moment Mark fired up the V10 engine, the showroom vibrated with a deep guttural roar. It was the sound of victory. He drove with the top down the engine's symphony, echoing off the downtown skyscrapers. Every red light was an opportunity for people to stare, to take pictures, to openly gawk at his success. Tiffany was in heaven, phone in hand, documenting every second for her legion of followers. "This is literally the best day of my life," she squealed over the engine's noise. "It's just the beginning," Mark yelled back, feeling a surge of adrenaline. He timed their arrival at the Daily Grind perfectly. 10:30 a.m. He knew Amelia would be there, likely tucked into a corner booth with a book and a cappuccino. He did 2 slow passes before finding the perfect parking spot directly in front of the cafe's large picture window, angled just so. The car took up nearly 2 full spaces. It was an obnoxious, arrogant parking job, and it was entirely intentional. The engine's roar as he shut it off caused half the people in the cafe to look up. He let the scissor door rise slowly, a piece of mechanical theater, before stepping out. He took off his sunglasses, scanned the cafe, and there she was. Amelia Sterling looked almost exactly the same. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple but elegant knot. She wore a simple gray sweater and jeans. She wasn't looking at the car. She was engrossed in a paperback, a half-empty cup of coffee beside her. For a fleeting second, a pang of something unfamiliar, nostalgia, regret hit him, but he crushed it instantly. This was not the time for weakness. "Showtime," he whispered to Tiffany. He pushed open the cafe door, a small bell tinkling overhead. He strode in, positioning himself near the counter as if to order, and then turned, feigning a sudden shocking realization. Amelia Sterling, is that really you?" He said, his voice a little too loud for the quiet space. She looked up from her book, her expression unreadable. There was no shock, no awe, not even annoyance, just a placid, neutral recognition. "Hello, Mark." "I can't believe it," he continued, walking over to her booth. Tiffany trailed behind him, a confused but smiling accessory. "What are the odds of all the places in the city? How have you been?" "I've been well," she said, placing a bookmark in her novel. Her calmness was unnerving. He had expected a flustered reaction, a quick glance out the window at the car, some sign that his display had registered. He got nothing. "This is my girlfriend Tiffany," he said, gesturing grandly. "It's so nice to finally meet you," Tiffany said, her voice sugary sweet. "Mark has told me so much about you." "Has he?" Amelia's eyes met Mark's for a brief moment, and he saw a flicker of something amusement. Pity had angered him. "Yeah, well, things have been pretty crazy," Mark said, leaning against the booth. "Business is booming. We just moved into the new penthouse at the Grandview, and well, you probably saw the new toy I just picked up out front." He jerked a thumb toward the window. Amelia's eyes followed his gesture. She glanced at the garish yellow Lamborghini for no more than 3 seconds before her gaze returned to him. "It's very yellow," she said, her tone flat. "Very yellow." That was it. He felt a surge of frustration. "It's a Huracan Evo Spider. A bit of a step up from that old Subaru you used to drive." "Huh." "The Subaru was practical," she replied evenly. "Practical doesn't close deals," he shot back, his voice hardening. "But I'm sure you're doing well. That little online business of yours. Still selling those leather wallets?" "Bags mostly." "And yes, it's doing well," she said, a small knowing smile finally touching her lips. "It keeps me busy." The smile infuriated him. It was the same smile she'd given him when he told her she lacked ambition. It was a smile that held a secret he wasn't privy to. He felt the need to press harder to crack her serene facade. "Well, that's great. I'm happy for you." "Truly," he said, the insincerity dripping from his words. "It's good to have a hobby. Me, I never have a day off. We're flying to Monaco next month for the Grand Prix, a client's private yacht. It's a tough life." He laughed, a hollow, self-congratulatory sound. Tiffany giggled on cue. "Mark works so hard. He deserves to spoil himself." Amelia simply nodded, taking a slow sip of her coffee. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark had fired his best shots, unveiled his greatest symbol, and all he got in return was polite indifference. He had come here expecting to feel like a king looking down on a commoner. Instead, he felt like a child throwing a tantrum for an unimpressed parent. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, his ego bruised, "we should get going. Lots to do. Big day. It was good seeing you, Amelia." "You too, Mark," she said, her eyes already drifting back to her book as if he were no longer there. As he walked out of the cafe and back to his monument of success, the thrill was gone. The bright yellow shell felt less like a trophy and more like a clown car. Tiffany was chattering away about getting a photo of herself with the car in front of the cute little coffee shop. But Mark wasn't listening. He had shown her. He had laid his success at her feet, and she had looked at it, called it yellow, and turned back to her book. The victory he had craved felt sickeningly hollow, and a new, unsettling thought began to creep into his mind. What if he hadn't been playing the same game as her at all? What if, while he was busy collecting symbols, Amelia had been quietly and effectively building something real? The hollow feeling from the cafe encounter lingered for days. Mark tried to bury it under the roar of the Lamborghini's engine, under late-night parties at his penthouse, and under Tiffany's vapid, constant praise. He posted relentlessly on social media the car in front of landmarks, the car at sunset, the car's steering wheel with his watch strategically in frame. Each post garnered hundreds of likes and fawning comments, a digital balm for his wounded ego. Yet Amelia's calm, unimpressed face was burned into his memory. About 2 weeks after he bought the car, the first sign of trouble appeared. He was cruising downtown, music blasting, enjoying the envious stares, when a small amber light flickered to life on the digital dashboard. Check engine. Mark's heart sank. A check engine light on a brand new $500,000 supercar. It felt like a personal insult, a flaw in the perfection he had purchased. He tried to ignore it, hoping it was a fluke, a sensor error that would reset itself. But it stayed on a persistent glowing accusation on his dashboard. The next day, a second problem emerged. A faint but distinct rattling sound started coming from the passenger side near the rear wheel, especially when he went over small bumps. It was a tiny, insignificant noise that a normal person might not even notice. But to Mark it was a screeching cacophony. His symbol of flawless, overwhelming success had a rattle. "Can you hear that?" he asked Tiffany, turning down the music. "Hear what, babe?" she asked, busy editing a selfie. "That noise, that rattling sound. Listen." She paused, tilting her head. "I don't hear anything. You're probably just being paranoid. This car is like perfect." But Mark knew he wasn't paranoid. The rattle was real, and with every bump in the road it grew louder in his mind, mocking him. The car was no longer a source of pure pride. It was a source of anxiety. He started avoiding certain roads, cringing before every pothole. The joy of ownership was being rapidly replaced by the fear of imperfection. The final straw came a week later. He had just pulled away from a valet at a high-end restaurant, eager to make a roaring exit, when the car's transmission seemed to hesitate. As he accelerated, there was a jarring lurch, a mechanical hiccup, that sent a jolt through the entire chassis. It felt clumsy, unrefined. It felt cheap. That was it. He couldn't stand it. This wasn't just a car, it was a statement. And his statement was apparently that he was a man who bought faulty, rattling, lurching status symbols. Furious, he drove straight home, the joy of the evening ruined. The next morning he called the service department at Prestige Automotive Group. His tone was clipped and imperious. "This is Mark Jacobs. I purchased a Huracan Evo Spider from you 3 weeks ago, and it's a piece of junk," he snapped at the service advisor who answered the phone. "The check engine light is on, there's a rattle in the rear, and the transmission feels like it's about to fall out. This is completely unacceptable for a vehicle of this price." The advisor, a calm professional named Michael, tried to soothe him. "I'm very sorry to hear that, Mr. Jacobs. If you could bring the vehicle in, our Lamborghini certified technicians will be happy to diagnose the issue immediately." "You bet I'll bring it in," Mark snarled. "And you'd better have a loaner car for me. Something decent, not a sedan. I expect this to be handled immediately." "Of course, sir. We'll take care of everything," Michael promised. Mark hung up, fuming. This was a colossal waste of his time. More than that, it was an embarrassment. What if someone saw him driving a loaner? What if the repairs took weeks? The entire ordeal chipped away at the flawless image he had worked so hard to project. As he prepared to drive to the dealership, his mind drifted back to Amelia's old Subaru. That car had been ugly, slow, and utterly devoid of status. But in the 10 years they'd owned it, it had never once broken down. It just worked. It was reliable, dependable, and unassuming. All the things Amelia was, all the things he had left her for. He shook the thought away. It was a momentary weakness. This was just a minor setback. He would go to the dealership, throw his weight around, and they would fix it. They had to. He had paid for perfection, and he would accept nothing less. He put on his sunglasses, straightened his jacket, and prepared to go to war. He was Mark Jacobs, and people like him didn't have to deal with rattling cars. The service entrance of Prestige Automotive Group was as clean and sterile as a hospital operating room. Technicians in immaculate branded overalls moved with quiet purpose around vehicles that cost more than most people's houses. Mark, however, was in no mood to appreciate the professionalism. He strode into the service reception area like a storm front, his face a mask of thunderous indignation. He bypassed the line and slammed his carbon fiber key fob onto the marble counter in front of Michael, the advisor he had spoken to on the phone. "Mark Jacobs, the yellow Lamborghini, the one that's falling apart." Michael, a man in his late 40s with a perpetually patient expression, didn't flinch. "Good morning, Mr. Jacobs. I'm sorry you're having issues. If you'll just give me a moment to pull up your file." "I don't have a moment," Mark interrupted, his voice rising. Heads turned in the waiting area. "I have a $500,000 car that rattles like a tin can and lurches like a broken-down taxi. What I want is a solution, not a file number." "I understand your frustration, sir," Michael said, his tone still perfectly even. "We'll get a master technician to look at it right away. In the meantime, we have a courtesy car ready for you. A brand new Audi A8. Mark scoffed. An A8A sedan. Do I look like a man who drives a sedan? I bought a supercar. I expect a comparable loaner. Do you have a Porsche, another Lamborghini? I'm afraid our supercar loaners are currently assigned, sir, Michael explained calmly. The A8 is our highest-end courtesy vehicle available today. This was the ultimate insult. Mark felt his face flush with rage. This is a joke. Your dealership sells me a lemon and then you offer me a glorified family car. I want to speak to your manager. Now! Michael sighed, a barely perceptible gesture of resignation. Of course, sir. Let me get Mr. Miller. He disappeared into a back office, leaving Mark to tap his fingers impatiently on the counter. He was aware of the other customers staring at him, but he didn't care. Let them stare. Let them see what happens when you try to inconvenience a man like Mark Jacobs. A few minutes later, Michael returned with another man. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of quiet authority. He looked to be in his early 50s. Mr. Jacobs, I'm David Miller, the general manager for the Prestige Automotive Group. Michael has briefed me on the situation. I want to personally apologize for the issues you're experiencing with your Huracan. His apology was smooth, professional, but Mark was too deep in his righteous anger to be placated. An apology doesn't fix my car, David, Mark said, mispronouncing his last name as Miller. Your dealership's reputation is built on selling the best cars in the world. My experience has been anything but the best. You are absolutely right to be upset, David said, his composure unshakable. And I assure you we will make it right. I will have our top 2 technicians conduct a full diagnostic. We will find the source of every issue, and we will not return the car to you until it is in perfect condition. As for the loaner, I apologize that our other performance vehicles are unavailable. The demand is quite high. Then you have a systemic problem, Mark retorted. You're selling more faulty cars than you have loaners for. That's a bad business model. David Miller's professional smile tightened almost imperceptibly at the edges. We pride ourselves on our customer service, Mr. Jacobs. I can assure you this is an unusual situation. Sometimes with high-performance hand-assembled machines like these, minor issues can arise in the initial break-in period. It's rare, but it happens. It happened to me, Mark said, jabbing a finger at his own chest. And I'm the customer who matters. A long, tense silence hung in the air. David Miller looked at Mark, his expression a careful blend of professional concern and something else, something Mark couldn't quite decipher. It was a look of assessment, as if he were sizing Mark up, not as a customer, but as a problem to be solved. Finally, David nodded. Mr. Jacobs, your satisfaction is our priority. Let me make a call. We have a new Porsche 911 Turbo S that was set to be a demonstrator vehicle. It's not typically used for loans, but in this case I'll make an exception. Will that be acceptable? Mark felt a small thrill of victory. He had pushed, and they had folded. That's more like it, he said, his tone softening slightly. Fine. A 911 will do. Excellent, David said. Michael will handle the paperwork for you, and I will personally oversee the service on your Lamborghini. I will call you with an update by the end of the day. As Mark signed the loaner agreement, he felt his sense of superiority returning. He had faced down the manager and gotten what he wanted. He was in control. As he walked out to the waiting Porsche, he threw a final glance back at David Miller, who was watching him with that same unreadable expression. Mark didn't know it, but his tantrum had set a new chain of events in motion. David Miller was a consummate professional, but he was also fiercely protective of his staff and his dealership. He had dealt with arrogant customers before, but there was a particular brand of venom in Mark Jacobs that had set off an internal alarm. When a customer became this problematic, especially with a brand new flagship car, there was a protocol. He had to inform the owner. David returned to his office, closed the door, and picked up his phone. He scrolled through his contacts to a name at the top of his favorites list. He pressed the call button. "Hi, Amelia," he said as soon as she answered. "Sorry to bother you. We have a situation here with a new Huracan customer. I think you're going to want to hear about this one." Amelia Sterling sat in her office, a bright, airy space that overlooked a bustling workshop. But this wasn't a workshop for cars. It was filled with long tables of supple leather, the quiet hum of industrial sewing machines, and the focused energy of a dozen artisans cutting, stitching, and finishing high-end handbags, briefcases, and wallets. Her company, Sterling Hyde, had grown far beyond the little online shop Mark had mocked. It was now a globally recognized brand celebrated for its quality and timeless design, with a valuation that would have made Mark's consulting firm look like a lemonade stand. Her success hadn't been an accident. After the divorce, she had poured all her pain, all her frustration, and all her underestimated intelligence into her work. While Mark was focused on acquiring the appearance of wealth, Amelia had focused on building actual value. She had reinvested every dollar of profit, hired the best people, and obsessed over the quality of her product. Her biggest investment, however, had been a secret she kept from almost everyone. A few years ago, using the substantial profits from Sterling & Hyde, she had started diversifying. Her father had been a master mechanic, and she'd inherited his love for well-made machines and his disdain for flashy but unreliable junk. She saw an opportunity in the luxury automotive market, not just in selling cars, but in providing unparalleled service. She began acquiring local dealerships, starting with a struggling Porsche franchise. She brought in her own management focused on customer experience over high-pressure sales and turned it around in 18 months. From there, she had quietly, methodically built a small empire. She called it the Prestige Automotive Group. It now included Porsche, Audi, BMW, and its crown jewel, the Lamborghini franchise she had acquired just last year. She wasn't a hands-on owner in the daily sense. She trusted her hand-picked general managers like David Miller to run the show. She preferred the quiet satisfaction of seeing balance sheets grow and customer satisfaction scores soar. Almost no one, and certainly not her ex-husband, knew she was the sole owner. It was her quiet personal triumph. When her phone buzzed with David's name, she picked it up immediately. He rarely called her during the day unless it was important. "Hi, Amelia," he began. "Sorry to bother you. We have a situation here with a new Huracan customer. I think you're going to want to hear about this one." "It's fine, David." "What's going on?" she asked, swiveling in her chair to look out at her thriving workshop. David recounted the entire story: the sale of the yellow Huracan 3 weeks prior, the customer's litany of complaints, and the aggressive, demeaning way he had treated the service staff, culminating in his demand for a supercar loaner. "He's a particularly nasty piece of work," David said, his professional voice edged with disdain. "He berated Michael, made a scene in the reception area, and told me our business model was failing because we couldn't give him a Lamborghini loaner on the spot. The name is Mark Jacobs." Amelia's hand, which had been doodling on a notepad, froze. A cold, heavy silence filled her end of the line. It couldn't be. The world was large, but the world of people buying yellow Lamborghinis in their city was vanishingly small. "Amelia, are you there?" David asked, concerned by her silence. "Yes, David, I'm here," she said, her voice steady, betraying none of the shock that was coursing through her. "Tell me this Mark Jacobs. What does he look like?" David described him perfectly. Tall, impeccably dressed, dark hair, an air of profound self-importance. He even mentioned the expensive-looking sunglasses he wore indoors. Amelia leaned back in her chair and let out a slow, quiet breath. So that was it. The chance encounter at the coffee shop hadn't been a chance at all. It had been a performance. A calculated move to flaunt his new purchase in her face. And now the symbol of his triumph had malfunctioned, leading him right back into her world without him having the faintest idea. The irony was so thick, so perfect, it was almost comical. "The issues with the car," she asked, her mind now sharp and focused. "Are they legitimate?" "Our master tech is looking at it now," David said. The check engine light was a faulty oxygen sensor, an easy fix covered completely under warranty. "We haven't found any evidence of a transmission slip. He might have just been unfamiliar with the feel of a dual-clutch system. As for the rattle, we think we found it." There was a loose piece of heat shielding in the rear wheel well. Again, a simple fix. These are all minor new car bugs. His reaction was wildly disproportionate. I see, Amelia said, a plan beginning to form in her mind. For 5 years she had let Mark's parting words, a cute little hobby, be the fuel for her fire. She had never sought revenge, believing that living well was the best kind. But now revenge, or at least a form of final definitive justice, had walked right through her front door and demanded to speak to the manager. She could have let David handle it. He was more than capable. But this felt different. This was personal. This was a chapter of her life that needed a proper resounding ending. Mark had built his entire identity on a foundation of superficial symbols, and she now had the power to detonate that foundation with a single simple truth. David, she said, her voice now cool and decisive, I want you to handle the repairs perfectly. Detail the car inside and out. Make it better than new. And call Mr. Jacobs tomorrow. Tell him the car is ready, but that due to the extreme nature of his complaints, the owner of the dealership group wants to meet with him personally to apologize and ensure he is satisfied before he takes delivery. There was a pause on David's end. The owner, you mean? You want to meet him? Yes, Amelia said. I'll be there tomorrow at 3 p.m. Don't tell him my name. Just say that the owner, Ms. Sterling, will be meeting him. Let's see how he responds to that. Understood, David said, a hint of admiration in his voice. He knew there was a story here, but he was professional enough not to ask. After she hung up, Amelia stood and walked to the large window of her office. She looked down at the beautiful, tangible products being created by the company she had built from nothing. Then she thought of Mark, a man so insecure he needed a car to scream his worth to the world. She didn't feel anger anymore. She felt a profound sense of pity and a quiet, steely resolve. Tomorrow she wouldn't be meeting him as his ex-wife. She would be meeting him as the architect of a world he desperately wanted to be a part of, but could never truly understand. The next afternoon, Mark Jacobs walked back into the Prestige Automotive Group dealership with a swagger. The call from David Miller had been music to his ears. Not only was his car fixed in record time, but his complaint had apparently gone all the way to the top. The owner wanted to personally apologize to him. This was the level of service he deserved, the recognition he commanded. He imagined the owner would be an older man, some silver-haired tycoon named Mr. Prestige, who would shake his hand, offer him free service for a year, and thank him for holding them to a higher standard. He had even practiced his response, a magnanimous, I appreciate you taking this seriously. I'm a reasonable man, I just expect excellence. He found David waiting for him in the main showroom, standing beside the gleaming yellow Lamborghini. It looked flawless, even more brilliant than the day he'd bought it. Mr. Jacobs, David said with a polite nod, your car is ready. The technicians have addressed all the issues and we've given it a full concours-level detail as our apology. Good, Mark said, running a hand over the car's perfect finish. It looks right, at least. Now where's the owner? You said she wanted to see me. He had been surprised to learn the owner was a Ms. Sterling, picturing some stern, intimidating businesswoman in her 60s. Ms. Sterling is on her way down. She's just concluding a meeting in her office upstairs, David said, gesturing toward a sleek glass-paneled staircase that led to the second floor. Mark was impressed. An office in the dealership. This owner was clearly hands-on. He felt a swell of importance. He, Mark Jacobs, was a customer so significant that the owner herself was coming down to placate him. He spent a few minutes circling his car, admiring his reflection in the waxed paint, feeling the power of the moment. This was how the world was supposed to work. The powerful men like him were catered to. Then he heard the soft click of heels on the glass staircase. He turned, a self-satisfied smile already forming on his face, ready to graciously accept the apology he was owed. A woman was descending the stairs. She was dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored navy blue dress. Her brown hair was tied back. Her expression was calm, composed, and utterly familiar. Mark's smile froze, then melted from his face. His brain struggled to process what his eyes were seeing. It was Amelia. His ex-wife. Amelia, who sold leather bags online. Amelia, who drove a Subaru. What in God's name was she doing here? His first panicked thought was that she worked here. He felt a surge of cruel, vindictive glee. This was even better than he could have imagined. He had come in to complain, and they had sent his ex-wife a saleswoman or maybe a receptionist to deal with him. The universe was truly on his side. She reached the bottom of the stairs and walked toward him. David Miller stepped aside respectfully. "Amelia," Mark blurted out, a mocking laugh already bubbling in his throat. "What are you doing here? Did they really send you out to handle customer complaints now? Working your way up in the world, are we?" Amelia stopped a few feet from him. She didn't flinch at his insult. Her calm, steady gaze met his. "Hello, Mark," she said, her voice clear and even, carrying easily in the quiet showroom. "I see you've met my general manager, David." Mark's brain stuttered. My general manager. The words didn't compute. He looked from Amelia to David, who was watching him with a completely neutral expression. You're what?" Mark stammered. Amelia gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I heard there was an issue with your car. I wanted to make sure it was resolved to your satisfaction." The pieces began to click into place with agonizing slowness, each one a hammer blow to his ego. The name David had mentioned on the phone, Ms. Sterling. Her calm amusement at the cafe. Her complete lack of surprise now. It was impossible. It was a nightmare. "You're Ms. Sterling," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. "I am," she confirmed. "Amelia Sterling. I own the Prestige Automotive Group, this dealership, the Porsche and Audi centers down the road too. That little online shop did better than you ever imagined." The world tilted on its axis. The bright lights of the showroom seemed to dim. The air grew thick and heavy, making it hard to breathe. He looked at the screaming yellow Lamborghini, his ultimate symbol of success over her, and saw it for what it was. A gaudy toy he had bought from his ex-wife's store. He hadn't been showing off his success to her. He had been personally handing her a massive check funding the very empire that was now dwarfing his own. His entire sense of self, the carefully constructed edifice of superiority he had built over the last 5 years, crumbled to dust in a matter of seconds. He saw the scene at the cafe with horrifying new clarity, his arrogant boasting, his condescending questions, her quiet, knowing smile. She hadn't been indifferent. She had been entertained. He wasn't a king showing off to a commoner. He was the court jester performing for the queen, and he hadn't even known it. He looked at David Miller, who was now watching him with an expression of faint professional pity. He thought of Michael, the service advisor he had berated. They all knew. They all worked for her. "We've fixed the faulty sensor in the heat shield," Amelia continued, her voice bringing him back to the crushing reality of the moment. "There was nothing wrong with the transmission. It's a high-performance clutch. It feels different. Perhaps you should read the owner's manual. David can show you where it is." Every calm professional word was a dagger. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't gloating. She was simply stating facts, and her composure was more humiliating than any tirade could ever be. Mark stood there speechless. His face burned with a shame so profound it felt like a physical illness. He had wanted to show Amelia he had won. Instead, she had revealed in the most devastatingly quiet way possible that he had never even been in the race. He was nothing. A loud, obnoxious customer in her flawlessly run business. "Is there anything else we can help you with, Mr. Jacobs?" Amelia asked, her tone polite, professional, and utterly final. He couldn't speak. He just shook his head, grabbed the key fob from the counter, and practically fled to the car. He fumbled with the door, the elegant scissor mechanism now feeling impossibly clumsy. He slumped into the driver's seat, the smell of expensive leather now choking him. He didn't look back as he fired up the engine and sped out of the dealership, the roar of the V10 no longer sounding like victory, but like the desperate, hollow scream of his own shattered ego. Mark drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring into streaks of crimson and gold through his unfocused eyes. The Lamborghini, once a resonant chamber for his pride, now felt like a sarcophagus. A very loud, very yellow sarcophagus, broadcasting his spectacular demise to the entire world. The Alcantara-wrapped steering wheel, which hours ago felt like the helm of a conquering vessel, was now slick and foreign under his clammy grip. The engine's ferocious roar, a sound he had equated with power and dominance, was now a grating, obnoxious shriek that attracted the one thing he could no longer bear attention. Every pedestrian who turned their head, every driver who stared at a red light felt like a judge and jury, their eyes piercing the thin veneer of his success and seeing the hollow man within. He finally found himself parked in a deserted, scenic overlook, a place he and Tiffany had once come to take a king of the city selfie with the skyline. Now, the glittering panorama of the city, including the distant illuminated spire of his own penthouse, seemed to mock him. He rested his forehead against the cold steering wheel, the smell of Italian leather once so intoxicating now turning his stomach. The scene in the showroom replayed in his mind on a torturous, unending loop. It wasn't a memory. It was a brand seared onto his consciousness. Amelia's face not angry or smug, but simply calm, as if she were discussing quarterly earnings. Her words precise and devastating, "I own the Prestige Automotive Group." The respectful step back David Miller had taken. The sudden horrifying realization that every employee in that building, from the salesman who sold him the car to the technician who fixed the rattle, answered to her. They had all witnessed his pathetic, arrogant performance. He had strutted into her kingdom, puffing up his chest, and demanded to speak to the queen, all while believing she was a peasant in a distant village. His entire life felt like a lie. The consulting firm, built on a foundation of unshakable bravado, now seemed fragile. His confidence had been his primary asset, and Amelia had just bankrupted it. He thought of Tiffany. Oh God, Tiffany. Their entire relationship was transactional. He provided the lifestyle, the symbols, the social currency, and she provided the beauty, the youth, the validation. But his currency had just been revealed as counterfeit. What would happen when she found out the story was too good, too deliciously ironic, not to spread like wildfire through their social circles? He wasn't the powerful Marc Jacobs anymore. He was a punchline. Across town, Amelia Sterling was also driving. Her journey, however, was not aimless. She was heading home. Her vehicle of choice was a dark gray Porsche Taycan Turbo S, a car that represented a different kind of power. It was electric, and as it sliced through the city streets, it was almost completely silent. The absence of a roaring engine left space for thought, for reflection. The silence was its strength. She had received a call from David Miller shortly after Mark had fled the dealership, his tires squealing in a final impotent display of aggression. "I have to say, Amelia," David had said, a rare note of genuine amusement in his professional voice, "in my 25 years in this business, that was the most satisfying customer interaction I have ever witnessed." The look on his face, it was a masterpiece. "Just ensure his file is noted, David," she had replied, her voice even. "He's to be treated like any other customer from now on, professionally and politely. No more, no less. His money is green." There was no thrill of victory coursing through her veins, no giddy desire to gloat. Instead, she felt a profound sense of lightness, as if a weight she hadn't fully realized she was carrying had been lifted. For 5 years, Mark's parting insults and his utter dismissal of her potential had been a small sharp pebble in her shoe. She had built her life and her businesses as a response, proving him wrong in a dialogue only she could hear. Today the dialogue had become public, and it was over. She had closed the book. Arriving at her home, the warm, inviting house filled with books, art, and the comfortable scent of worn leather from her workshop, she felt a deep sense of peace. This was real. The feel of the worn oak floors under her feet, the sight of her sleeping dog on the rug, the quiet satisfaction of a day's work well done. These were the things that constituted her life, not the fleeting admiration of strangers on the street. The fallout for Mark was as swift and brutal as his humiliation had been. The following week he drove the Lamborghini not to Prestige Automotive, but to a rival high-end consignment shop. He couldn't bear the thought of facing Amelia's employees again. The dealer, sensing his desperation, gave him a lowball offer. Mark took it without argument, the six-figure loss a tangible price for his hubris. The story reached Tiffany 2 days later. A friend of a friend who worked in detailing at Prestige had recounted the entire glorious tale. Tiffany didn't confront him with tears or accusations of deceit about his past. She confronted him with cold, pragmatic horror. "You let her do that to you?" She'd shrieked, her face a mask of disbelief. "She owns the dealership. Mark, everyone is talking about it. We look like a joke." He saw then with chilling clarity that she was never with him. She was with the idea of him, the penthouse, the Lamborghini. The moment the symbol was tarnished, the connection was severed. She packed her bags that night, her departure less an emotional breakup and more a strategic business divestment. His professional life followed a similar trajectory. The unshakable, borderline arrogant confidence that had won him clients was gone, replaced by a nervous, haunted energy. Clients sensed it. Deals stalled. His empire, built on the shifting sands of perception, began to wash away with the tide. He had spent 5 years desperately trying to prove he was a winner. It took Amelia 5 minutes to show him he had fundamentally misunderstood the meaning of the word. He had been chasing the echo of success, the applause and the accolades, while she had been in the studio quietly composing the symphony. Amelia never saw Mark Jacobs again. She didn't need to. Her victory wasn't in his ruin, but in her own quiet contentment. She continued to build her businesses, to innovate, to lead with a steady hand. Her greatest revenge was not the look of utter devastation on his face in that showroom. It was the simple, peaceful pleasure of the next morning, walking into her leather workshop, the smell of her own success in the air. Her past a closed chapter, and her future an open, beautifully crafted book that was entirely and indisputably her own. What an incredible story of quiet confidence versus loud arrogance. Amelia Sterling proves that true success doesn't need to be shouted from the rooftops. It speaks for itself through hard work, intelligence, and integrity. While Mark was busy buying symbols of success, Amelia was busy building the very institutions he looked up to. It's a powerful lesson in humility, and a reminder that the loudest person in the room is often the weakest. What did you think of Mark's downfall? Was it the perfect serving of karma, or do you feel a shred of pity for him? And how perfectly did Amelia handle that final reveal? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love this story of karma and empowerment, show your support by hitting that like button, sharing it with someone who needs to see it, and most importantly, subscribing to our channel for more real-life drama and inspiring stories. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss an update from us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.